Morning, friends. Eventually, as I get to know people in the prison, I can start to raise the possibility that their time in prison, especially if it's become something of as a surprise to them, is that this may be a blessing. Now, this is a tricky conversation to have because many people will look around and feel so horrified that they're in prison that it's almost impossible for them to see that. But for a certain type of man who I talk to, there is that opening where I think, based on something that they've said, they're starting to see this as time out, perhaps from their lives, from their stresses and strains, from their debts and addictions, drama, relationship crises. And this is a time where they don't have to do too much. They've got a huge amount of time to lie on their bed and think, and reflect, gaze out the window, read. And sometimes I feel that Quakers, and perhaps anyone who doesn't come into prison regularly, might think that it is an impossible ask, that you might see it as a blessing. I mean, one of the things that I say to people is if you look around your cell, as basic as it is, today you have what you need. Give us this day our daily bread. You have a roof over your head, you have food, you have a blanket, you might have company and support with a padmate, which is perhaps some fellowship that's new for you. And I can very quickly see in some conversations that this is not a conversation that somebody wants. But much more often than not, if I have started that line because of something they've said that gave me a way in, more often than not, they agree with me. And it's really interesting because I was speaking to another chaplain who said, I'm not sure about the food, Emma. One hot meal a day, it's not great. And I must admit, I think the food is what would challenge me. That and the top bunk. But yesterday, I was walking back to the wings with two men who had been to the quiet group. And I said something about the food because one of the guys who had never been in prison before was saying it's been a remarkably positive experience so far, these first 2 weeks in prison. The detoxing and the clarity and the support that he's getting. And then I mentioned the food, something like, well, except for the food. And they both exclaimed, no, the food is great. And the young guy who is in and out of prison all his adult life, wise head on young shoulders, said, oh, it reminds me of school dinners. And the older guy who's new to prison, never been in before, he said, the fact that someone is cooking for me every day. And he was just in awe. And I think sometimes, what are we comparing a prison life and conditions with? Am I comparing it with my day of walking the dog and maybe shopping, maybe a nice steak for my evening meal, chatting with my friends, watching a film or TV? If I'm comparing it with things that I think, well, I couldn't do what I wanted to do in prison, but you don't know what these guys are comparing it against. Loneliness, poverty, lack of opportunity, lack of support. Nobody goes out there asking, would you like to come to the quiet group on Tuesdays? That doesn't happen in normal life, does it? Nobody knocks on your cell door and says, food time, and somebody has cooked you a hot meal. So I do think that even if you yourself never go into prison, you can learn from these experiences and perhaps have some humility that actually in Britain today, in 2025, we provide a very humane existence, and it's potentially a healing place for people to think about their futures.